Record. Yes, so we are recording. Nice. Welcome back, campers, to part two of what is an ENG 101 and ENG 501 run through of the Canvas room and a look at our syllabus, assignments, course requirements. We'll have a look at modules, the Google Drive, the reading lists, the YouTube channel, and Google Scholar. So this is part two today. Part one should already be there for you if you need to go back and look through that. What we've done already is we've basically said hello and introduced ourselves just to this room. We're looking at 101 here. It's duplicated more or less in 501. We looked through the course overview, task completion, subject description in the EMNA and we went down and went through the course summary here, and we looked at how you can subscribe to the calendar in Canvas so you'll get any updates as they happen. And we discussed some of the spacing and interleaving. We looked through the teacher-led sessions 1 to 20. We skipped some of them for the detail. And we also pointed out that you have student-led sessions in the afternoons. Perhaps a note to say that on a student-led session, for example, normally we'd break for lunch at 11:45. We've been through the timings there. And I would say if it's with me or if it's something I want to do, I'd probably be available for the beginning and the end of the session because you'll be in a Zoom room in Canvas. Then you can go into breakout rooms yourselves and work as groups. It's student-led to encourage autonomous and self-regulated learning and student interaction and active learning, but there'll also be normally a teacher around and about, and sometimes we might use those and the teachers will be involved as well. So we looked through all of that and the syllabus, and what we're going to look through now is we're going to come back up, as we can see over here, and we're going to have a look at modules. We've already seen that I send announcements. We're going to look through assignments. There are discussions, grades, and people. We'll just quickly skim through that, but more importantly, we'll look at the Google Drive. We'll look at your reading list, which requires me to go in between the two rooms, and we'll end up going to the Google Drive and looking at the YouTube channel that's linked to it and the stuff there, as well as a quick introduction to Google Scholar. Again, any of these things, if you've got questions, we've got a session at the beginning on Tuesday as well when I'm there, and we can just like do a hands-on, or how do I do this? So we'll make sure that everybody knows what they're doing. So I mentioned before that you've got sort of 4 interleaved modules with sort of, as you can see, Erica is taking picture books. And you've seen that already on your reading list that we work a lot with picture books in this term, particularly when approaching things like language learning, grammar and vocabulary. And they're gonna go all the way through this term. I start off by doing classroom practice, kicking off on the Monday. We then have academic writing, which works obviously with your portfolio texts. And then we have English language learning and acquisition with me, which interplays with classroom practice and prepares you for your written exam, which is a communicative exam. So it's not a multiple choice, yes, no, right, wrong type exam. We'll look at that later and you'll have access to previous year's assignments and exams. So basically, all that material should appear here as well. We've got the books, which we've already sort of pointed to, your 2 base books, Twinkle Twinkle, Munden and Meyer, there it is. And also that's for the 1 to 7s, for the 5 to 10s, there it is, English på mellanstadiet. by Juliet Munden. I don't have the Sylvian to hand that goes or comes in later as a support for your own competency in grammar, particularly. Any extra reading, links potentially to the foundational material, online lectures, the flipped classroom, as we might call it, and to the YouTube channel, if I specifically want you to look at things, will appear here as well in good time. So you'll see this filling out now through the week in preparation for your first sessions. But just to be quite clear, most of the stuff, or there's a lot of material available already. Personally, I'm very happy when I specify reading for you to potentially look at some of the course reading after you've done the modules. Perhaps you could begin by looking at what's available in the flipped classroom, following lectures. You can look at the actual theorists themselves talking, and to really sort of form your own impressions and self-organize, as I'd call it, in teaching terminology. Though the books are very good as well, you can also do it the other way around. You can approach that reading first if you want to. So that's modules. That will be built as we go along. Enjoy, and that's our sort of go-to for material that you might be needed. Announcements we've seen, and I can be quite chatty. Feel free to reply to these announcements as well if you're not sure. Here, for example, I said let's do the meeting over on one side because I wasn't sure myself what was going to happen, and there I just posted a link to a cheesy 1980s song that I will never forget. So then more important is right here at the moment, it's quite limited, isn't it? What you see is the real sort of nitty gritty, the nuts and bolts of what you will have to be doing, that's for sure. You have course requirement 1 and 2. I should probably rewrite that. What I've done is I've simplified things this year a little bit. Previously, we have done other things. We may still set up some blogs if you want to join us. I tend to write educational blogs and sort of things on WordPress. But here we've decided that you're going to write 3 texts. And one of those texts is your course requirement. You're going to do a seminar where you're going to share those texts in any format you want to. And I think difference and variety is important. We'll give you some guidelines very clearly there, or sort of boundaries. And that will be the oral part of your course requirements. So obviously you need to complete those to be able to then go on and be examined. Plus also attendance is nominally 80% or 80% task completion. So I'll be looking for you to, obviously we've already talked about that. If you cannot attend, you need to let me know, but you can still complete all the task work, which counts as attendance, because we have a flipped classroom, so you can see all the lectures anyway. And here also we have portfolio text 2, to be continued, or it should be, sorry, to be confirmed. So details we're going to fresh out, because we want to sort of replenish and sort of renew the course this year as well. And text 3, what we do know at the moment is text 1 is sort of semi-formal. Text 2 is formal. We'll be using textual sources, Google Scholar, and text 3 will be integrated with your teaching placement. So it will be sort of based on observations whilst on placement. Text 2 will be integrated with use of picture books in various aspects of the classroom. So those will be fleshed out as we go through. I think if I click on this, there's a beginning sort of idea. I'm not 100% sure that I'm happy with even using the epithet good English teacher here as well. I've rephrased this question for my first session with you, which is what kind of classroom do we want what kind of classroom teaching and learning, teachers and learners do we want to create? Classroom practice, basically, is the major question. There's a description here for this first text. We're going to wait until halfway through the first session, and then we might just brush up on it, and you'll be all sort of updated on that. But for the moment, we've got sort of the base of last year, which is a text about, what do you think, what kind of classroom teaching and learning do you envisage, or do you want to get into, stand for? So those are your assignments. They'll be updated. They have delivery times that are reasonably spaced at the moment: 1 September, 1 October, 1 November. And you will be able to get teacher assessment. Erica will be doing some, and Victor from Vestfold as well will be doing teacher assessment. So you should be able to expect teacher assessment on 2 out of the 3 texts, important. But you will also, of course, do peer assessment on all of them in groups, and you will be given exemplars, as in previous year's texts, so you can self-assess against the genre and what's expected of the text type. Okay, good. Now, we've got other bits of Canvas we don't use as much. I'm sure some of you know Canvas quite well. This is actually last year's discussions, which I can sort of whip out. You can see there's all sorts of bits going on to give you an idea of the kind of thing we get up to. I'll clean these out. This is sort of how we do. We've used Where the Wild Things Are, fantastic book if you know it. Sort of like lots of digital presentations and films and drama projects, and that's typically mine and our approach to this sort of first. You've got songs going on to language learning, so it's going to be a super active term. I'd best clear those out. You've got your grading section. Previously, we used the people section to create groups, but I don't think we're going to need to do that in Zoom, but perhaps a word about groups. You can obviously, potentially last year, we set up writing groups that stayed stable, so people had a very similar working environment, whereas for the classroom practice and for the English language learning and acquisition, I mixed groups, and I'll be doing that this time as well. So everybody gets to work with everybody and gets to negotiate different social setups, because that's the prime part of that skill. Whereas with the writing groups, sometimes we think a bit of stability through the term, instead of getting to know each other and working together. It can also be very useful to change groups, and you've got those afternoon student-led sessions, at which point you can go through Zoom. I'll set up the Zoom meetings and sort of get into groups and sort of maybe see what other people are saying. One thing to remember is, different people are going to have different things to offer, and it can be very important to see what other groups are doing and what other group members are doing. So that's people. This is going a bit faster, which is good, but I'm going to need more time for the last bits. If I click here, there, on the Google Drive, this does not work whilst masquerading. Okay, never mind. I'm not sure what that means. I've granted access to a Google Drive here, but because I'm not you, let me show you what I see, and I will have to do a quick little dig. I was expecting this to turn up and be linked for you as well. I'll come back to that. Basically, all the modules, everything is in the Google Drive, and it would also give me a chance to put you. Let me just leave student view. I'll have to double check this. I thought this was going to work. Here you had English 1 overview, and all the sub-documents related were on the Google Drive. At the moment, I just share them openly. You can also send them to the Google Drive, and I will provide you with the address. but I had set up all the modules, and this would have been a good place as well to save all the video. I can put them on the YouTube channel as well, and to go through the 4 modules, hand-ins, there's task completion, etc. When you do group work, it is excellent practice to always set up a live, preferably for me, I'd rather use Google Drive, document, a real-time editor, as we call it. This means that you can come into the classroom, we can focus on you being productive, we can come into your groups and monitor, as the technical term would be, and give you teacher assessment. But you'll find in writing, using real-time editors such as Google Drive, we're just going to have to get our procedure right, and we'll do that in the classroom next week, because we'll use the technology in the classroom as well. You can find that your teacher will be able to give you, I did some research last year in a study, and it showed very clearly how teacher assessment and feedback for written work could be increased in an online or virtual classroom. So it will be very good when you do tasks, you go into groups, you'll produce a document which you'll work in, and obviously that can then be filed, and that will show that you've completed the tasks. And if you're not in the session, it means you can also do exactly the same thing in your groups and submit. You can even record your sessions as well, of course. So the jury's out on that at the moment. That was a little bit unexpected. Okay, I thought this was going to be here and you were going to have at least access to it. It might mean I can only share it through the other function. We'll double check with that. If not, we'll find another way around it. This also meant that you could have seen on this a complete progression as well. So here's English 1, and then it goes into English 2 and different versions of English 2 all through the literature stage, which is my speciality, through fairy tales, Gothic, fantasy, diaries, science fiction, and it also includes obviously seminars, English 4 as well, which is a slightly more complex module, ending in a term paper as well. So I will find a good solution. Ideally at the moment, I'm trying to find one where you don't have to log in, because often we'll have we need 2-step verification, and it makes it a little bit complex. So the jury's out, and I will do that Tuesday morning. I'll make sure, and in my groups, that everybody's working into documents. Which means, I guess, a Google login is useful. So let me come back out and into the student view again there. That is why it's very useful for me to see what you're seeing over here. And I'll pop us into student view back again. So the Google Drive, okay, not a great success. We'll write down some questions for that for the minute. There's chat and collaborations, but I envisage that most of how we're going to collaborate is going to be in Zoom and through online real-time editors like Google, and creating documents which I can then look at. Okay. Woof. Breathe. Respirer. Souffle. Let's have a look at Pensum, YouTube, and Google Scholar. So we've got slightly different reading. Oh, you're kidding me. Interesting. Has anybody else had this, or is this just because I'm in student view as well? And maybe that means maybe I don't then log in. That's why. Okay. Oh, it's all falling apart. I think it's because I'm logged in as a proxy, and so it doesn't take me to this, but I know that you've had this. So what I'm going to do is we'll just have a look at the Pensum. I will explain a little bit about it. Then will be, this is Draman. That's not right, is it? This is Multodon. We'll look at 501 in a minute as well. So you've all got very similar sort of setups. It was choose one or more of the following titles. And Erica was telling me that they're all available in read aloud versions online. So we'll get those into the module on YouTube. So we've got access to that because some of them maybe they haven't got them. But there's no reason why you can't interact with them. So we'll get those up there in the module. You should then be able to have a look at all of this. They're also in some of the online lectures and reference material, and the PowerPoints will use these too. Julian is a Mermaid has been written about a lot recently. It caused a bit of a ruckus at a school near Birmingham that was primarily Muslim, and they wanted it banned. So it's definitely something that is, I don't see it as provocative. It's a small boy who likes dressing up. You know, what's the big deal? But I do understand that it interrogates and questions cultural sensitivities. And for me, that's what a good bit of literature does. So this is a recent book from last year, 2018. These are all my sort of recent editions. Equally important, I think this is a great book and worth looking at if you're 5 to 10 as well. I'm going to say that right there. The thing about picture books is they can cross over that divide, and if they don't feel too childish, which they don't have to, I don't think these do at all, these books, they can speak across both primary and intersecondary and vice versa. So you can use the Gruffalo all the way through for me. My Name is Not Refugee is a wonderful book that I had to put onto the syllabus. It's worth everybody taking a look at. Excuse me. It looks at the narrative and perspective of a migrant in what was potentially probably the 2015 migrations into Europe, and is a very important book. You should look at it. We'll make sure there are versions online up there so you can do read alouds. And the excellent Carson Ellis, who's a great illustrator. He does some illustrations, what I love, for one of my bi-weekly reads, The New Yorker, which I just love and adore, and he illustrates for them as well. And this book, Home, explores the concept of just that, of home, through universality, as in similarity, and difference as well. So it's a fantastic book. We've got books which, those are the sort of the newer titles which I added to this course, and we kept on some of the older titles as well. The excellent Scaredy Squirrel, The Dot, where everybody has creativity and difference, and a very different sort of illustrated book from the 90s, Chicken Sunday. I'd warmly recommend those top three. I also think the bottom two are excellent. You should be able to see and experience all of them. We've been through the teacher's guide. I'll be covering everything that's in this book pretty much, or well, I mean, not this term, but over the 2 terms. I might not be dealing with it directly. I will be referring to it wherever we sort of cross paths. I use lots of other material and reference material, which builds on or touches on very similar areas. So this is an excellent, well-written book, and I'm going to be outlining which parts of these you can read as we go through the course. I do have study questions. I think there are in every chapter. And that's not a bad thing to think about working on. I've done it before online through a polling website called Poll Everywhere, which I can put out and use for you if you wanted to do it. And I've taken some of the chapter end questions, like here on vocabulary. Those are excellent group activities as well for student activities to go through, and perhaps just take some of the questions at the end of the chapters and discuss them. For example, here from page 141, how could you teach these words and chunks? A sheet of paper, ugly, complicated, to giggle, at 7 o'clock, in fact. And that's, so there's some really good starting points. One way to look at that is to actually approach the the study questions first, which would be called self-organizing. You actually sort of try and attack the material and see what kind of knowledge base you already have. So this is a great book that will be very useful. And this is also another great book as well, Twinkle Twinkle, which also has, I'll be setting this up as reading. Obviously, you're going to be asked to use these in all your texts and on your exam. It would be good to maybe learn some references or be able to refer to these two books. I'm just going to have a look here as well. For example, here on page 23 as well, you can see some of my notes in the margin there about Dewey, learning by doing. There are some questions there as well on each section as well, which is an excellent way to attack books like this as well. You can flip it rather than reading. You can do it as group work, look at the questions and see it as a discovery exercise. And a discovery exercise is something obviously we'll be doing a lot of, or we'll be thinking about in terms of grammar particularly. Grammar discovery being a technique of communicative learning. So that's a great book. It's a great tool. You can use it, you can read it yourself, but you can also interact with it as groups. And I think that's something you could do with your student-led activities, sessions. Lovely. And then, let's get rid of that for a minute. The grammar book, 2 seconds. Might have it down here. Oh, hello. Do apologise, it's at my other house. I'll bring a copy of it as well with you, Essential Grammar, and it deals in chapters that we can relate to sessions. I think it's 2, 3 and 4 of ELL, but I'll talk about that when we go through approaches as well. Okay, let's have a look at the reading list for 501. We pip down here into Pensum. Yeah, I don't have these books here as well. They're all up at the other house. So I'm not going to be able to show them to you, sadly. But you can see the covers. I order all this stuff off Amazon normally, and I use Amazon DE in Germany, which is very quick to Sweden. And that's probably sort of within the EU. That might make it things easier. Here we've got Australian artist Shaun Tan. Oh. And I think we've got a couple of his books. So we've got The Red Tree in here as well by Shaun Tan as well. The Red Tree explores emotional well-being and mental health. It's a beautiful book. The Rabbits interrogates, it's beautifully illustrated, colonialism. Neil Gaiman, who you'll find all over the YouTube channel and particularly the literature modules with the sort of pseudo crypto horror or psycho thriller, The Wolves in the Walls, with a very different style of illustration there by Dave McKean. We've got narratives based on non-fiction, Joan Proctor, Dragon Doctor, The Woman Who Loved Reptiles. Consumerism, interrogated by children's poet laureate Chris Riddell, again an illustrator who will turn up again and again on these courses. Very important, both writer, author and illustrator. And we've got Arthur and the Golden Rope, which uses Norse mythology. The award-winning Joe Todd Stanton there as well. Most of, see the books that have been recently added are these from the 2010s there. So we've got a long list. Again, I'll get into the YouTube channel and make sure that there are versions of it that you can look at and interact with. Because for me, it's important that you get a breadth and use lots of text as much as possible. not just get one text out of it, and see authors that you like. And we're going to draw all of these picture books in with the language learning and acquisition as well, as much as we possibly can. So that's the pensum. That's the literature list, both sides, the set books, the course books or didactics, whatever you want to call them, are the same for both sides. However, if we move on from there, what I'm going to do now is look at the fact that there's a lot more that we can maybe go to on YouTube. So let's have a little look. My YouTube channel is let's have a look, or this YouTube channel. There should be, lovely. I get a lot of this sort of blocked activity, which is why I've now decided to, that's probably my last year students trying to use all the material, but it's gone public access here as well. So normally, you know, I'm going to share a different view. Excuse me 1 minute. I'm going to open a different browser running via a VPN, and we're going to go in and share that instead, Firefox. So we'll see what you would potentially then see as you go in. So here, lovely. Oh, there was a question over there. That's from a long time ago. Just looking here over that question on the board from Manveg as well. So is compulsory activity. The days set aside for you, the teacher resources are normally used in the morning, and some of the student-led activities are compulsory, like where you're having a seminar, you'll have to record it. Your peer assessment is compulsory. However, if you need to reorganize and do it at a different time, that's absolutely fine. Certain groups might find it easier to work in certain environments, some of you might be closer to each other, etc. It's not hard and fast in those terms. So I'm quite happy to accommodate people. Maybe say, for example, week 36, some people will be at another course meeting. You might want to form a group and do your activities there as well. When it just says reading and writing, that's pretty much free. You can organize yourselves in groups, and I just really warmly recommend that, because that might seem harder to control and easier to just do it on your own. I think there's plenty of evidence that points to the fact that doing it the hard way is the way that increases learning. So being in a group with all the difficulties that that brings. That's my recommendation anyway, and I will flag very carefully for what is compulsory or not. So I'm just going to go, that's a little quick passing answer there. So I'm going to pop myself as you would, potentially, just going to YouTube. I'm using YouTube at the moment because obviously it speaks to the kind of sort of, certainly if you're in secondary school, good Lord. My channel, which I'll put a link up to as well, it'll be on the front page, is at the moment called English USM. Oh, why is it all the way down there? Unbelievable. I was about to have a heart attack, people. I was like, what the hell? Say what? It is there, and it's funny, that's the exact word. Why would everything else go above it? I probably need to put my tags and work with them a little bit more clearly. What we've got here is you've got a ton of videos, lectures, all the way through. Let's see, I am your father. Paddington. Oh, Paddington's in there, look at that. So these are all done in OmniJoin, which is slightly more goofy client, but it's a lot of material here, and I've got more that I'm going to add to it from previous years as well. Very often where I've got a PowerPoint, I'll just go into Zoom and record it as well if I'm not doing it with you, and I'll record it when I do it with you as well. So there's plenty of time to access it. Do remember though that social component of learning and negotiating group dynamics, even though sometimes it's harder, is clearly and evidentially a way to long-term learning, success and perseverance. More of that later, because it's one of my big things. Playlists. So under playlists, these are all open access. There's all sorts of bits and pieces in here, as you can probably see already. There's The Simpsons, there's Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. That's one of our choice of texts if you do things with me next term. And there's a whole bunch of stuff all the way through to English 4, according to what I call it anyway. I've got 4 sort of levels of English that equate to your terms. And here, let's have a look in the modules. What have we got going? The empty ones, which will be filled very soon, have got Kermit the Frog as a fairy tale reporter in Sesame Street as their placeholder. However, for mine, for example, module 2, there's classroom practice. Apart from the fact that YouTube is benighted with adverts these days, my phone's getting quite loud. What we've got here, for example, if we skip the ads and can start it here as well, I've started off in our first lecture, and this is all in the reading as well, so it's doubled up, and you can use Google Scholar to get through to it as well, is for me, like, motivation is just like a massive, massive issue. And there's Edward Deci, who is the world's most foremost researcher in ideas surrounding motivation. It's all evidence-based. Deci and Ryan will be using as we go along. Here's a lovely thing where he actually explains it to you, and I think that's really cool as well. I think it's awesome to actually engage with scholarship and scholars and realize that they're like people who, you know, it's not just boring book smart stuffiness, even though he's stuck in his little place, in his little cubby hole there. Deci and Ryan is well worth looking at, and we'll be using it throughout the term. It builds on what's already in, you know, our course reading, but I'm going to take it further because I'm very interested in the psychology and sociology of learning. He's a sociologist. We'll also be looking at, for example, here, I think this is more of an interview. Sometimes I've got explanations. This is the unpronounceable Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who's done lots of work on creativity and flow. And his work is super instructive in terms of classroom practice, as in what kind of learning, teaching, and environment we want to create. We'll be looking at these in class next week. I've also picked out, and you can start looking through and thinking about some of these ideas. I've picked out Carol Dweck, another professor of psychology, and her work on growth mindsets, contra fixed mindsets, and the power of yet. We'll have a look at that later. There's both a talk with her presenting it, and as usual, I've tried to find some sort of, you know, multimodal online explanation as well. And then I finish up with Judy Willis, who's a sort of neurologist and cognitive scientist who became a teacher. And she does a lot of work on emotion, anxiety, and stress, and the brain, obviously, from neuroscience. And you might want to, at the moment, that's how far it is at the moment. It's got to her reviewing practices and which ones are supported by cognitive science and neuroscience. Super interesting. So that for me is a sort of one way of engaging with the modules here. We've got, going to back out, see if I can go back to the library and playlists. Oh, sorry, I have to go search again. I have to go all the way down to find mine. Do be patient with the fact that I haven't obviously tagged it well enough. I will sort that out. So in the playlists as well, there are lectures. As you can see, there's one on pronouns, there's one on sentence structure. Whether we're using them or not, they're going to go into your playlists. They're all in the videos as well. And at the moment, I've also started filling up, for me, that's Stephen Krashen, who you will become familiar with for his 5 hypotheses about language learning and acquisition. There he is doing a lesson in German that is understandable. That's his term, comprehensible input. So you can have a look here through some of the ideas about particularly language learning and acquisition, grammar and vocabulary, which I'll be building on here as we go through as well. That's a nice one. We've got Mr. Spock. Mr. Spock hat 2 Ohren. We can all understand that. So this is going to be a very important part of the course in terms of foundational material and a resource. I will try and get that further up the list so it appears when you actually search for it. It's about number 30 at the moment. And you can, I think it's free. You can add to the playlists if you find stuff that's interesting. Please do. And you can have a look at, let's have a look at what else is in here. I think we'll already find, for example, stuff on playlists. That's it. There's a picture books module from English 2, which has got lots of stuff in there as well. You can see there's lots of fairy tales going on there as well. So it gives you a chance to access the entirety. There's all the lectures from English 2 as well there and English 4. So I'll be, if I specifically want you to look at something, let me come out of there for a minute and go to here. I'm going to do a new share and I'm going to share to Safari. So if I specifically want you to, let me go navigate back, to look at something, or we're deliberately going to use it, or maybe if it's even for classroom practice, as we probably will next week, I will put a link in here as well. As you can see, I've already put a link in there as well to start off. It takes you to the classroom practice YouTube playlist, number 1 as well there. If I want to highlight something, I will actually put it directly in there. The same with the reading from the overview. If we go back here and go to the overview on the homepage, like I said, will probably be, it doesn't mean you have to read entire books. Here we've got some of those psychologists, educational psychologists down here, and I've tried to choose short, quick articles, something that you can maybe just have a look at. The Dweck one there, for example, is in Education Week and is only 4 pages. And they're all accessible online via Google Scholar. So what's Google Scholar, Charlie? Well, let's have a look. I'm going to grab that. And I think another thing that you need to do is to really sort of break down the boundaries here of Google Scholar. Here we go. We can see this is one of my identities. The USM one for linking in. You create a login. You have a profile, and this is like this is not mine. You can find me, obviously. This is just the USN account with it. It then has a library of anything that I have cited, or I star them, so they go into my library. So you can actually go into this as well if you want to, and then This is a very good citing tool as well. So when you are doing, say, any of your portfolio texts, obviously we are going to get into, and you'll do in academic writing, some citation. Lots of citation tools are a bit wibbly wobbly. They don't do the job well. This is done well. So we use APA, and you can always cite nice and easily straight from here and ref the works. So if I take that Dweck article, right, there it is. Okay, now I can get into that. Open access. This is actually quite an easy one. It's a more of a journalistic text, if anything. You can see here as well. More like an article. Very useful. Short piece of reading for you. If you're interested, and boy is this interesting, then it's just a chance for you to access it. Now I can then also have a look at all of Dweck, which is there as well. So we can see this is a great tool, and I'd say it's probably easier than going through the library. It allows you to see, as you can see here as well, all the things that are online. And this will be useful through both of these terms as well. You can see she's got quite a lot that's readily available, which means you can look at some scholarship quite simply. You don't have to read all of everything, but you can access it, you can cite it, you can build a good bibliography or reference list, what it's called different things. I think you probably call it references in APA. And we can go through years, relevance. You could even think about, I just mentioned motivation, for example, and look, shaboom. Now that's not available online. It is via the library, which probably has subscription to Wiley Online. I know I do. But you can see here that we've got things about motivation. You can even then go through to see a scholar himself. DC's got a profile, all his scholarships there, and all his citations as well. You can even follow him. How lovely is that? I'm going to follow him right now. I'm going to go for new articles and new articles related, and have them sent to me. So how good's that? I'm now following Edward L. DC. I'm going to get an update with things that you can see his keywords: self-determination theory, motivation psychology, things related to it. And this really puts me in the area here. You don't have to read everything, but you can engage with scholarship and see it as a sort of a living process. So that's what I'm doing when in the overview as well. I'm just trying to point you in the general direction. If I don't give you a link, that's because, you know, at the moment I'm putting that down there, aren't I? I'm saying it's all readily available. That's because I think it would be really positive if you yourselves go in and engage with them. So for my session 2, for example, which I can see right here, I've given very specific page numbers for where there's work on just on drama and doing films in London, and I want you to access that. And then I think the equivalent really is more sort of using picture books, rhyme, charts, etc. For primary. I'd really strongly recommend using drama for the 1 to 7s, and because of that, what I've done is I've quoted from, this is not a chapter, no, it's, yes, sorry, yes. That's a chapter in this, which is literature for the English classroom. And one of the contributors to this is Gwenna Williams, who is a professor at the Norwegian Study Centre in York, where I'll talk more about that later, where there's a study trip organised to, I think it's week 17 in the spring term, don't quote me yet. There's no guarantee I'll be with you for that, but what we'll be doing is putting out information about that soon. So she specialises in drama, particularly for the primary classroom. And so I'm pointing towards this text, which is readily available. If not, you can go in and find some of her other work. And also here as well, the whole, I just talked to you earlier about a book called Make It Stick, whose main thing is about learning the hard way, about putting obstacles almost in the way of learners to help them to have to reconceptualize things which increase learning, help creativity, perseverance, etc. That whole book is available online, so I popped that in there. I'm getting a hard copy of that because I was so impressed by it and I've been using it in my research. But if we go into Google Scholar and do research, this is a great book. And I accessed, oh, it doesn't look like it's here now. Yep, it's all there. Oh, that's an article about it. That's not the same thing. I've got a full copy of this as well, so I'll be able to share that with you. I think this was available in full. No, it's not. Okay, let me have a look at that. If not, I will. I'll put. Probably I can take an educational fair use extract from my copy when it arrives and put that up for you as well, so we can have a look. But it's a great book, and I'll bring that with me next week as well, so we can have a look at that. Oof. My voice is almost gone. Wow. So that takes us back to the beginning. We've now been through Canvas, the two rooms, which sadly aren't united. We've discovered this morning that I will probably have to invite you to from room to room for the meetings. So we are all in a shared room. There doesn't seem to be any other solution for that. I've got IT on it. We've looked through the syllabus. There's a course overview for you to look at, which will be updated as we go along. There's task completion, which we'll be able to fill out from next week when we start doing tasks. And we looked through the calendar in Canvas you can subscribe to, and just looked at some of the teacher-led sessions, 1 to 20. And then we also have the student-led sessions, which after they start off with simple self-study. For those of you who put aside time for this, I think it's great to maybe be able to work in groups, and I would strongly recommend it. We put this in writing time. We put in seminars. There's one for the portfolio text one. And we put in peer assessment as well. The peer assessment you do need to do, but obviously you can arrange to do it at another time. You can share your docs via Google and Google Drive and have a real live editor. And you can do your meetings in Zoom and hand them in as well, or video even your meetings as well. So there's all kinds of possibilities. And we'll be looking at that a little bit at the session next week. That will be probably our second task with me in the afternoon. We'll actually put something together and share it. We looked at modules and saw how it was organized and saw how this also mirrors, this is my view, so you only see the top 4, how it mirrors the YouTube channel with its 4 modules, which at the moment, classroom practice and learning and acquisition, language learning and acquisition are already filling up, and we'll be filling up picture books with read aloud versions of all the texts on from both sides. And the YouTube channel is a chance to see if there's anything different from the other one. It will also be included in that single channel, so you'll get both the 1 to 7 literature and the 5 to 10. We went through assignments, and those are in the EMNA plan, saying we have a course requirement 1 and 2, which is portfolio text and the seminar to present it, where you'll be given instructions and you're allowed to present it in any way you like. Then you have your 2 portfolio texts. In the end, you choose 2 from those 3, and we're going to schedule 2 chances for teacher assessment. You're also going to get peer assessment for every text, and you'll be able to do self-assessment by looking at previous year's texts and exemplars. Starting with number 1, The Good English Teacher, which I may just slightly change in name, and our first classroom practice will be based on this idea of, what kind of classroom practice do we want to have. So we've looked through the reading list. We've looked at the YouTube channel, which is built on it. We found out that Google Drive was not necessarily linked in the way that we hoped here at the moment, but I will look through that, and hopefully we'll have that up and running straight away at our sessions next week. If not, I'll find a workaround so we can all use the same drive, or you just share your documents to me so I can then see them live. And obviously I also showed you from the reading lists the extra material, and the fact that most of it will be available, at least 90% on Google Scholar. If not, I will find other things that are available, or I'll supplement it with educational use extracts. And that, I think, is 11:30. Whew, made it. So that is really the end of our first session. That's a run through. So I'm going to say thank you very much for listening. Anybody on YouTube or catching up on Catch Up, should do pay-per-view for this session. You've got session 1 and session 2, which is a complete run through of the course. Thank you for listening, and we'll have a chance to do this in class as well. And any questions we will iron out next Tuesday. So I'm going to stop the recording for the moment.